Hello, this is Andy Zulina from Silicon Valley Innovation Center. I would like to welcome Patrick Hogan, Managing Director at Gateway Adopters, to our today's webinar on the topic Innovation Demystified, Beat the Odds and Gain Competitive Advantage. Welcome, Patrick.
Well, thank you, Andy. I appreciate the opportunity to share the Innovation Demystified lessons. I've spent a career focusing on the best ways to innovate and help my teams create compelling breakthrough offerings fast. And it's great to be able to share that 25 years of experience with an audience. But in some ways, what I'm going to share today is some of the lessons that I've learned when I was a teenager, an early teenager. I grew up in a family of scientists, but worked in a garage. And what I found is if I had really good tools in my garage, I could go out and win races. And some of those same principles are going to come through in the story I tell today and the lessons I've learned and what I share. So what you can get out of today's information is understand how to get to new revenues faster than traditional methods. Just as I worked in the shop to help create winning race bikes and would go win, I'm going to help you understand how to lead a team to create a compelling breakthrough offering in a fraction of the normal time. And make sure that when you do that, you engage the right people for your breakthrough offering. And this is a concept I call gateway adopters that we'll talk about. Also, some of those lessons learned is in order to do these high risk things, how do you mitigate your risk killers? Killer risks, and identify and manage the big ones, and use the myriad of tools that are out there like Agile, Lean, and design thinking. On top of that, help you understand how to continuously improve how you innovate. So that's my goal for today, is share those three key insights. At a basic level, the systems for developing new offerings is broken. 90% of innovation projects just don't make it into product, and the innovation theaters people are creating are really not getting tangible results. And this applies both to the Fortune 500 with high churn rates, where there's big consequences because about 40% of them fall out of the big indexes over a 10-year period. And it's equally possible or equally present in the venture capital world. So, most projects fail. We've sat back and we watched companies like General Motors, Chrysler, Kodak, and others go away. So there really are big consequences to failing. It's also true that you can't not do anything. So there's something you must do. You can't just look at it and say it's there and do what everybody else does, but you need to think about what you can do. Now, over the years, I've looked at the tools that I've worked on and the ones I've accumulated, and they very much key on these five key things, the things you need to focus on in order to be successful. You have to look at customers, and are you getting to the right customer for your offering? And are you getting feedback from the customer fast enough about the right topic in a way you can act on it? There are issues around value. Are you solving a compelling problem for that customer? And are you actually looking and selecting the most innovative solution? It's very much focused on value and the problem set. There's a set of challenges around the features you build. Are you investing in the right features, or are you putting too much effort into the wrong features, or too much into features you need, but over-investing in them? And there's a big area around risks. Are you clear about the risks that you're going to be taking on with your project? And are you mitigating them in the ways that are actually going to learn the most for the least? And then key lessons about the teams. Are you taking and leveraging your team's competitive advantage in the market? And are you aligning the work they do with what customers value? These are the key themes that my learnings have found, and I've constantly been helping my teams do a better job of. Now, in an effort, even though we're looking at all these new core things, or the core things that you needed to look at, how people are managing project is going through big changes. You know, earlier in my career, waterfall was common, but that's changing, and people are learning a more, they're using a learning style. Agile is becoming more popular. Lean, the lean startup models are becoming more popular, and the design thinking is getting even more sophisticated. So these are all switching to learning models where there's high risk, there's not a guarantee of success, it's something you haven't done many times before, and teams are adapting. But in some ways, I have to say, again, this is some of the lessons I learned when I was racing motorcycles, is I would go in and use a new tool, a new lathe, a new machine shop, and take my bike out, and I'd go see if I could go faster. The world is turning to the high competition learning model. Another key aspect is the gateway adopter, and that's the concept I talked about earlier. Now, that's why I've named my company about gateway adopter, because when you're trying to disrupt a market, gateway adopters are an important set of people that repeatedly disrupt their own market. And so as I've over the years learned how to understand who they are and how they behave and how you can find them, engage with them, and emulate them, I've taken on a lot of those lessons so that I can offer those lessons to my clients in consulting, coaching, and training, helping look at innovation best practices and the transition and adoption of those best practices in a safe and risk managed way. Now, the methodologies are novel, but they're often very proven in some areas. So they're proven ways to actually help do new breakthrough things. And they go across 5 key areas. And yes, they support Agile, Lean, and other project management methods. Now, the summary of what I've learned is that innovation is actually pretty simple. It may be hard to do, but it's actually pretty simple. It's 4 steps and a 5th if you want to get better. The 4 steps are basically setting your business strategy and your ideation, deciding what product strategy you're going to do and what projects you're going to pick, executing that project precisely and effectively, and engaging the market to get great feedback. Those are the 4 steps, and it's actually pretty simple. Yes, there's lots of ways you can do each of those, but those are the things you need to do, and you can use this model to figure out where you need to focus. For the 5th step, which is how do you innovate on how you innovate? How do you continually improve your process of getting great ideas, selecting them, executing, and engaging the market to figure out if you're really adding value? This model exists because one of the other lessons that's really understood and being understood is big rip and replace projects are not the right way to come up with a great way to do anything new, whether it's an IT project, a change management project, or how you innovate. There is no perfect model. There's no perfect endpoint. And understanding how you can improve what you're doing rapidly is a lesson. How can you help your system act like a Darwinian system and continuously improve and mutate and get better is the lesson that's been learned from these complex systems. Now, as I spoke of, like when I grew up in the shop, I learned that really powerful point tools could help me go make a better race bike. This is an example of a sets of tools that are actually questions that I answer in each of the areas. So if it's in business strategy, there's a series of questions like, what is your strategy and what are you trying to accomplish? How quickly can you explain the concept to the team? These are all point issues. So you can scan these and see that these are very point scoped choke points in how you innovate. And there are several in each of the buckets. This is a little less than half of them. What I'm going to do for the rest of this presentation is talk about examples of each of these so that you guys can get a feel for how you can use the system to understand where you are and then find an opportunity to go solve a specific challenge. So even though there's 40 ways you can do it, each is scoped, and there's the breakthrough innovation loop helps you figure out where to focus and execute. So the first example is one I'll talk about for the business strategy, and I'll walk through each of these 5 sections with an example. Often teams have come to me and said things like, I've got so many projects to pick. Which one should I pick? I actually had one person come to me and said, we have almost 50 projects that we could pick. And what I did is I said, hey, let's step back in the process. I'd known them well, so I could kind of change the dimension of the conversation. Let's go figure out what kind of projects these are, because it looks to me like you've got apples and oranges, and that's very much what they did. We were able to clarify that of these 50 or so, that they had lots of different fruit, more than 4, lemons and oranges and apples. And what we did is, in a span of actually a few seconds, I put this on the whiteboard where one axis is products. We looked at the products that they were offering and said, is this idea an existing product or a new product? And is it going to an existing market or a new market? And we could start to drop these projects into the matrix and figure out where they are. And we soon saw that there was a pattern. There was clumps, that some of them were just helping with the existing market and a spin on existing products. Some were very much about new product development. Others were taking an existing product to a new market. And a few, small. So of the 40, it kind of spread out. Most of them were in the first sector, and very few of them were in a complete diversification mode where they were about developing a whole new business. But after we plotted these out, what we quickly learned is the management team I was working on said, well, hold on, there are a lot of risks associated with actually going to new markets. So they decided that this whole top row, market development, going to new customers, is something that they didn't want to do. They were more technically focused, and they wanted to focus on actually making the most. So within a few seconds of plotting these out, of the 40 plus projects, more than half were seen and understood to be actually about different customers, and we got rid of those. We had about 2 or 3 clumps here, and we were able to say, look, we got apples and oranges and pears. Let's actually choose the project that's best and assign a portfolio model to figure out how you were doing. So by using this Ansoff model, we are able to quickly categorize what kind of strategies they'd be pursuing with those projects. And in the conversation, we created KPIs that allowed the decisions we were making to actually be acted on operationally as we made decisions later. And you'll see that in a couple of other models. It creates a clear product strategy because you can align the business with the growth and allocate your resources. And then you have operational metrics and benchmarks for success for what does a great product look like when you're trying to do product development for your existing market? What kind of returns do you expect? What does it look like? And what was important also about this matrix is it clarifies the risks you're going to engender that correspond with the strategy you're picking, and you can actually use that as part of your investment guidance. So that was an example of understanding a strategy and then making that strategy actionable across the team. And it was something that didn't take us very long. It solved clarified a lot of issues really quickly. Again, a point solution to part of your innovation problem. So when you're thinking about product strategy, there's also some challenges. And again, most projects fail. And a lot of time it's because they're not creating enough value to solve a problem. And I had enough experience to see that one of the challenges was people weren't people mostly use the stack ranking model for value. One thing is higher than another, which is actually a single dimension. It's a one-dimensional tool. Something's high, something's low. What do we do? And that really was choosing to be a problem, because I was proven myself by actually doing some research with my own customers that it wasn't actually helping my team. I did what's called buy a feature, where I gave my customers $100 and asked them to spend the money. And what I found out was that some people were spending the $100 on capabilities for the product that had to be there. They were musts. In a way, they were on a Maslow's model, they were hygiene products. And they put all their money there saying, hey, you got to do this, you don't have a product. In fact, I would use a car analogy and say it was like making a family car and it was sitting on blocks. I said, yeah, I got to tell you what the tires and wheels are for your product. Others in the same research were telling me, oh, well, I figured you were smart enough to make tires and wheels, so I just put all my money in interior and talked about how lovely your interior should be and gave all these compelling things. So that, on the flip side, I was getting somebody voting for completely different reasons, which totally negated each other and they contradicted each other. So even though I had lots of data, it was totally wrong. And that led me to understand that there are different models. So there's a two-dimensional model that's out there that thinks about whether a feature is present or absent, and whether you're happy about that or upset about that. And when you walk through a decision tree where I've operationalized it, you can begin to understand what is potentially compelling about your offering. So you ask a series of simple questions where, is it essential, yes or no? Does some value make it better? Again, if it's not valuable, is it potentially a delighter? And are there things that you have in your backlog that maybe they'd be mad about, or they just don't care? I walk through the team and help them develop a product strategy for what's compelling, and help a team, sometimes for the first time, put their feet in the shoes of the customer to decide what kind of value, the type of value they're creating with each of the investment that they're bringing. It also has a great way of adding a new language for the team for debating why they're doing things. Often surfaces conflicts where people were both right. They just didn't have a language to talk about it. And they come up with a great understanding and empathy for each other and align behind the value they're creating. Now, how I use this is I would also then help the team understand how to operationalize what these categories mean. So I would build what I call the layer cake. So I would help them build out their roadmap and filter through their backlog by categorizing the musts in the first layer, usually just a simple whiteboard exercise, put their sticky notes where the linears are, and understand how many delighters they have in their backlog. And when you apply this, it becomes clear that you have multiple delighters. In fact, I've never had a team that actually had only one delighter. I've had as many as 24 on a startup, and the least I've had is 3, where they're actually developing 3 different compelling reasons to buy the product all at the same time, because they didn't have the language for what was essential and what was a linear. And so they were working hard, but they didn't realize they had different releases all built into the same product. So what I then help my team do is understand, how can we look at one delighter, a delighter, hopefully that their team is better than anyone else at building, focus on that, and then deprecate the other capabilities for now to build out the first scenario and the first release that I call the compelling offering, where you define one theme. Now, in a startup, what I found, I helped the team quickly at a 90-minute meeting. We found out that they had a complex project that they thought would take 9 months. And we realized that it had lots of customization. Well, we knew it was, but they wanted to make it flexible. And what we realized is if we pulled out some of the flexibility, they could strip out a 9-month release and they could create a simplified version that was not completely customized, but relevant to their audience in 6 weeks. And so we had a compelling offering in the hands of customers on the way to the vision in 6 weeks, because they realized that some of what they could do, we could slice off a compelling offering, get it out into the market, and then learn from it. And frankly, we learned quickly. Within 2 weeks, we started floating the rest of the roadmap, and we found out the second customization set, a thing that took lots of security and lots of customization, actually didn't have value. And so the team realized that they really didn't need to build for the first versions of their product something that was going to take them 3 months. So in the end, the new language and new rules to get one compelling feature out at a time, and use what is called the Agile principle number 10, maximize what you don't build now, help the teams release quickly and get important feedback from an important part of the market quickly. So they knew what not to embellish, and they released what was compelling. They didn't overinvest in what they didn't need, creating a really great coherent team that created a great market fit in weeks and not months. Now, once you've looked at your product strategy and you've stepped into your delivery on what it is you're going to do, I've also helped my teams think about the risks that they engender. Now, this is something that gateway adopters do, and I'm going to talk about that next, on who they are and how they behave. But one of the things I learned from them is they know their risks and then they mitigate them. And what I've done is, instead of having lean be a fire of a hypothesis and not knowing why something might have failed, I have segmented the risks that you can engender in a product into at least 4 different styles. So actually, this starts back at the Ansoff model, where depending upon which growth strategy you pick, you have different amounts of risk of these different types. So if you're doing complete new product development into new markets with new products, you have all 4 of these. If you're choosing a simplified strategy that doesn't engender, say, technology risk, because you're taking existing product to a new market, you may be mostly about go-to-market and business value risk. So immediately what I'm saying is, take lean and use it to mitigate the risks that are appropriate for the strategy you're picking, instead of just treating all projects the same. And then when you actually do the lean cycle, you actually don't know the risk that's causing you the pain. Somebody can say, no, it's not good enough, but you won't know if it's because of the technology or the go-to-market or the business value. So what I help my teams do is look at the strategy, understand the risk profile they have, and then sequence a lean and agile model so that they first engage on the highest risk. So let's say this is a startup. The first thing you have to make sure is, do you have enough value for someone to do it? Is the concept actually going to be there that someone would pay for it? And if you can't get through that and get yeses, even at a concept level in a lightweight exercise, probably need to figure out what would be or pivot. That mitigates and focuses the team on what the metrics and benchmarks are for a real decision. Then you can work on the design experience. Can the value that you promised in the concept actually be realized by the users, and start to work on the design, and then start to work on the technology, where you've now understand your metrics and benchmark, you understand the configuration that's usable by the new users that you've engaged, and then you can begin to then ramp up your work on how you're going to sell it. So you can sequence this. Now notice, by the way, you don't go away. I don't say business value stop. What you do is you invest the least early to learn the most and pivot, focus, mitigate your risks, and then move on to the next risk in your sequence. This way you can learn, pivot early before you've made big investments, kill concepts that really should be killed early before you've invested big money, and increase your rate of return. Giving lean a specific risk type to mitigate as you step through your project. In a large, very large platform project where there was lots of people involved, there was decision makers who decide on technologies, there were people that were using it, developers and end users, where there was architects that were working with existing legacy systems, and you had a complex selling process through partners. This becomes very valuable, so you can sequence through small investments and identify the right people to actually mitigate your risk. Because if you talk to, say, architects and you're talking about business value, frankly, they may not know. So this also helps my team engage the right people with the right questions and mitigate their risk, again, for the least amount of investment. So the fourth stage, and often sometimes more important, is the market engagement. And this is answers the question about how do you find the right unique customers to lead and adopt a breakthrough concept. So some of the best information on this was published by Jeffrey Moore. He talked about the chasm and he talked about the different psychographics. It's a very useful concept. And because I had done early work in risk management, actually change management and personality types, there was some good information. Now, when I started my career, I had done some internet startups in the 90s, and I had experienced the innovators adopting my new concept, but it actually didn't go anywhere. And then later, when I was working for a large, very large software company that had existing customers, and we were listening to them, we made exactly what they said they wanted. And then they didn't buy. They said, oh no, someone has to use it. It has to be used at least 10 times. And in between those experiences, Jeffrey Moore had published the book, Crossing the Chasm, and I had come to realize that in the first experience, I had been talking to innovators and some early adopters who didn't indicate where the market was going. And in my later experiences, I was talking to the early majority who really needed things to be tested. So I took on the process over the span of a couple of product releases, or about 8 years, trying to come up with a clinical way to understand who I should listen to and how I should filter out the people who were confusing me. Because in the market, when your team is trying to try a new product, they get confusing feedback. Some people love it and will try anything, and some people hate it. And you'll get actually contradictory feedback across the adoption curve psychographic, even though you're talking to the same role. You can talk to the exact same demographic role. So I set out and found this group that crosses the chasm and bridges and takes unproven concepts and operationalizes them to solve and prove that they solve a problem that then the mass market or early majority will follow. Now, what was very eye-opening is this is a unique set of people, and it's actually how they behave was a huge sore thumb. They were so much different. Their mindset was a combination of thinking that was very unique. There was other people that may have one or two of these traits, but none of them had all three. That they had a mindset that they constantly focused on creating a competitive advantage by looking at their top challenges, and they knew what success looked like. They had the skills to know their risks before they took them, much like I have tried to demonstrate with using the Ansoff model to identify your risk before you start doing your project and investment. They knew what risks they were going to engender, and they had a portfolio of risk mitigation models for each type and level of risk. So they would say, hey, if I'm going to do this project, here are the 4 things that could kill me. there's 2 or 3 things I could do for each, but here's how I do it. So they would actually structure their projects to mitigate their risks. And they did, at the time, it was really evident that they did full lean. So their whole business process was about a learning experience for the team, not just the dev team. The whole organization went through the process of the learning steps of defining and learning and bringing that lessons back to the team so they could act on them. Other aspects that were, again, definitely with this team and very predictive is they satisfy. They achieve an effect and then they move on. Some people, there's a science out there called theory of constraints, where it was in manufacturing, where you look at choke points. That's very much how they thought. Hey, they reduce the choke point and then stand back and see what happens. Or another way to look at it is they have lots of nails that are sticking up. They always know what the top 3 are, the highest nails. They know the top challenges, and then they hit them. But once it's lower than the other tall ones, they stop. They don't drive the nail into the board. So they are continually building out the skills they have to mitigate these risks. In other words, they have lots of different hammers, and they go learn about new hammers to hit new nails. And then they constantly use these to innovate on how they improve. So they, in this kind of choke point model, they come up with new ways to actually help their teams get better at kind of a meta level. They don't just make the project better, but they learn how to actually help their team innovate in new and different ways. So these gateway adopters are the people that, if you have a breakthrough product, you have to get through them or with them and solve their problem so that you can go through this gate, cross this chasm, and then get to the masses. And so for the overall picture, there's the how do I change how I innovate? And these are hard lessons from lots of work on helping teams do new and different things. And let me start by saying, one of the things that, if you look at how people innovate, trying to actually implement a whole new system often fails. So you actually use some of the same principles when it comes to actually how you innovate to how you improve your innovate. So if this is the innovation loop, you find a choke point in that loop, you organize and solve the choke point for that problem. You implement some change, and then you look and make that change repeatable so that if you come up with a new way to, say, use some of the tools I've shown today, assess value. Once you see that that works for your team, you figure out how to roll that out safely across the team. You're not changing everything they do and how they innovate. You're just changing how they think about value and implement how they think about value. And then you move on. Maybe the next choke point is project selection, which there's a whole set of models for that. Maybe it's how you set your strategy. Maybe it's how you get feedback. But you look at a specific area and then you fix it. So you don't do a big rip and replace. Again, very much the theory of constraints model, and there's a managerial breakthrough book by Joseph Duran on how to go through the steps, laser focus on an opportunity, and then fix that. So if you are looking to create a competitive advantage with your team and repeatedly keep that wave ahead of time so you don't become one of the firms that kind of languishes, there is a way to actually use some of the same principles on the innovation cycle. You can use a Kaizen model for how you innovate to address the challenges you have and the choke points, and then you can repeatedly have impact, not through dramatic change, but through undramatic quick steps that sometimes have dramatic outcomes. Changing the way you think about value has big effects. But you can do these in small steps so there's no big failures, and you can come up and develop a way your team creates great new products in innovative ways. So, gateway adopters. I have several years of experience trying to drive new products into new markets, and I appreciate the opportunity to share them with you. It's about unsticking a team and helping them create a new compelling offering fast. I've done this across a wide range of markets, and I've learned the lesson through rigorous research. The insight into gateway adopters was after hundreds of C-level interviews and talking to or actually getting surveys of thousands of decision makers with hundreds of thousands of data points and using rigorous game theory models and sophisticated insights on value to create the insights that I've shared with you today. In the end, what I have built is a great set of diagnostic skills to help you identify where there's the best opportunity to help your team perform. And I can engage through workshops, consulting, or coaching to either help you in any numbers of areas. I can help you develop a strategy and an ideation process so you act like gateway adopters. I can help you engage the market to make sure you're identifying, engaging the people who are most likely to take your new concept and prove it to the mass market. Or I can help you with execution on how you set strategy, how you set the concepts of value, and actually develop in a streamlined manner. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to an opportunity to help your team get to new revenue quickly by aligning what they do with what customers value.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I think this was very interesting and insightful. So we really do look forward to continue this and maybe share more insights in the future webinars. Appreciate your time, and I'm sure this will be well received. Thank you.